All right. I am calling to order the July 10th, 2024 Pikes Peak Area Council Board of Directors meeting. Looks like everybody can hear. Looks like we got technology going, so we're starting a little late, but hopefully we can make up some lost time. Andy, can you go ahead and establish a quorum, please? No, maybe if you just step up to the microphone here at the podium.
And I'm simply going to suggest we do self-introductions in the room. We need 7 for a quorum. We have 6 in the room, and I know a handful on online, so I'll need help from Jared doing the online introductions. Why don't we start with introductions in the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Start on my left, please.
Michelle Tellerico, City Council, District 3.
John Graham, Mayor, City of Manitou Springs.
Todd Dixon, Mayor, Green Mountain Falls.
Yolanda Avila, City Council, Colorado Springs.
Eric Stone, Teller County Commissioner.
Okay, and I have a list online. I have, if I miss your name, please speak up. I have Commissioner Dick Elsner from Park County, Mayor Mitch LaKine from Monument, Mayor Kelly Case, Woodland Park, Commissioner Stan Vanderwerth, El Paso, Councilmember Lynette Crow Iverson, Colorado Springs, and Mayor Annie Durham, Victor? Cripple Creek. 50-50 chance there. Okay. All right. If I missed your name, please unmute and identify yourself. Okay. Okay, great. We got a couple military partners here today. Fantastic. Thank you. Are there any other elected officials online that I missed your name?
City Council at large alternate.
Okay, thank you very much. And that takes us on to item 2, agenda approval. And everybody in the room, you're just going to have to kind of light up. I can't see.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second John Graham.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the agenda. Any further deliberation? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that takes us on to item 3, introductions, public comments, and presentations. Mr. Gunning, staff recognition, Pamela Haugard.
Pamela Hogard,
Okay.
come on down, please. Pamela has been with our case management team within the AAA for a number of years. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but just really happy to recognize Pamela's 30 years with us here at PPACG. Just has done an extraordinary job. So,
Andy, I need you to look right in the microphone and maybe even move it up a little bit towards your mouth. Yep.
Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry Hoffman, our HR specialist, and she's going to recognize Pamela for her 30 years of service with PPACG.
Thank you, Board. So Pamela it has been with PPACG for 30 years. So we're very excited about her service. She stated that she's most proud of the retirement series that started 10 years ago. It is a team effort, but she enjoys leading that effort to ensure our aging adults have access to this information. Pamela is also proud of a past program, which was called Grandparents Raising Grandkids, which helped to give additional resources for grandparents in those tough times. She is also, one of her most fun programs was her sex, drugs, and rock and roll program. So Pamela has enjoyed the staff she has worked with through the years and all of the many, many clients that she has been able to serve. A few words from Melanie Hendrickson. Pamela's passion for educating others and increasing awareness about the various challenges and victories experienced by older adults is truly admirable. She skillfully utilizes her compassion and creativity along with her knowledge and experience to assist others in their times of need. Her kindness, charming personality, and contagious laugh are among her many assets that are so appreciated by all of us. Congratulations on your anniversary, Pamela. And Rick Sonnenberg also wanted me to state that Pamela is conscientious and has always been committed to her service of our older adults. So Kent would also like to say just a couple of words.
I'm Kent Matthews, and I oversee the Family Caregiver Support Program at the Area Agency on Aging. Pamela, working with you has been a joy, an utter joy. Whenever there was a question about who should make the return call from a voice message from a senior or from a caregiver, our discussions to decide who would make the return call were always educational for me, and I know for you as well. And they allowed us to provide the best service coverage to the caller, which is what made them so important and so special. You have always been available to help clarify questions for me or to assist with covering my needs. And I have been very blessed, very, very blessed to work with you all of these years. Thank you.
Oh, my.
You don't have to carry, these are heavy. You don't have to carry these out. We will do that for you.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
lovely.
Thank you so much. Did you want to say a few words?
I'll try to make it short. It's been a journey. It's been a real journey. Had I known when I started how the years would go so quickly, how I would learn so much from staff, from programs, and from clients, had I known that, I would have still been here. I would have still been here. I have chosen this. This has been my work. This has been my professional commitment. And this opportunity to talk has given me an opportunity to really embrace the last 30 years of my life. And I thank all of you for being here and doing what you do. And I have to tease Andy because 30 years, I mean, he was just starting kindergarten, right? When this was starting. So anyway, thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor and a journey. Thank you.
Great job. Nicely done.
Pamela, on behalf of the entire board, thank you for your commitment to this community, an often overlooked community, and you made sure that that didn't happen. So thank you very much for your commitment. Thank you. And did we have any comments that have typed in chat, Jared?
And while he's checking, I also want to recognize before he scoots out of here, but Kent Matthews, you heard from our manager of our Family Caregiver Support Center. They're a model across the state and really across the nation for taking care of family members that have to take care of seniors in their households, and they're not trained for that. Kent is retiring. His last day with us is going to be Friday, August the 2nd. Huge shoes to fill. We've got a great person that's going to move into that position internally, but really want to thank Kent for his many years of service with us as well, and just the amazing impact that he, along with Pamela, have really had on our seniors and their families across the region. So thank you, Kent.
Well, I highly doubt either one will be completely retiring. So I'm sure we'll see you around.
Those are
I'm sure
volunteers,
Andy's
yes.
already got a few boards and committees picked out for you. So, all right. Thank you very much. Jared? Oh, a photo? Okay. You want us to come down then? Or you just want us to stand up right here? Okay.
Trying to make sure I don't block anybody. Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to public comments. Public comments can be made before or during the meeting. Public comments during the meeting is limited to 3 minutes and can be done at the meeting location or remotely by using the posted Microsoft Teams link. Individuals are encouraged to notify the meeting organizer at before the start of the meeting with the agenda item they would like to comment on. Public comments can be submitted in writing. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to offer public comments? Seeing none, do we have anyone online?
And Madam Chair, I'll ask anyone who is online who would like to provide public comment to use the raise hand function. In that time, we did not receive any advance requests, and we did not receive any submitted public comment. And I see no hands raised.
All right, thank you very much. That takes us on to item C, military installation reports. And we do have a couple people from USAFA online. So if they would like to go ahead and unmute and give us their report.
We had a successful graduation this past May where we sent over 1,100 new officers, or I'm sorry, not 1,100, over 900 officers into the Air Force and Space Force, creating the future leaders and leaders there. Additionally, processing day for the class 2028, the last week of June. This week we are also welcoming 250 prep school candidates into our preparatory school here at the Air Force Academy. Additionally, as far as impacts on the base, are going for the general populace and everything goes is we do have significant capital improvements that we're doing, sustainment maintenance on our roads here on base. Our one of our main is currently under a full depth replacement, so that is closed until 27 July. Additionally, our north gate facilitates the roundabout construction between the Tree North Province, the visitor center, hotel. For approximately 3 weeks to mitigate this. We do have additional manpower that will be on the south gate to facilitate the additional traffic flow that will be through there. And we are excited to announce, we're excited to receive our incoming superintendent, Lieutenant General Power Fund. He will take assumption of command of the Academy as the superintendent on 2 August of this year. So he's currently in the transition from 2 August. We're excited for the changes for developing leaders of character. And again, we just continue to appreciate the support of the very supportive military community throughout the fall. Standing by for any questions.
Okay, thank you. And you said Northgate is only closed for 3 weeks? Okay.
So, that decision that the state can have for 6 weeks and have single lane traffic. The contract would be much quicker. So, yeah, we're looking at a 3 week time.
Okay, great. Around about in 3 weeks, Andy. That's like unheard of. Do we need to hire some new? And let me have the name of your contract. No, I'm kidding. All right, thank you very much. Okay, lots of changes going on there, and lots of new young folks there getting going. All right, and we also had another person on from USAFA. Did they want to say anything? All right, and thank you both for attending today. Appreciate it. Do we have any other military partners online? All right, hearing none, we will go on to the next item, item 4, consent agenda. These items will be acted upon as a whole unless they are called upon for discussion by a board member or a citizen wishing to address the board. We have consent agenda items 4A and B. What would the board like to do?
Mayor Dixon, I would like to ask a question. The report is saying that we're both 67% under for revenues and expenses.
Would you like to go ahead and pull off the financial report then?
I just have a general question on whether or not we can attribute that to anything in particular.
I don't know, but Carol, our finance director, can certainly address that.
Thank you. So the 60% is because we were only through 5 months. And so our budget is for a full year, and so we are 67% under budget with 5 months.
And it's just because we're of the time scale for the 5-month period, or is there, are we seeing less revenues in a certain area, or is it just in general?
I think it's in general. I don't feel like we're under revenue in any area. I feel like we're as projected. So yeah, I'm not concerned about that number at all.
Okay.
I think you'll see it get better as improve as the year goes on.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. All righty, so that consent agenda item 4A and B, what would the board like to do?
I would move approval of the consent agenda as presented. John Graham.
Second, Eric Stone, Teller County.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further deliberation? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. That takes us on to item 5, action item, resolution for traffic data service, William Mast.
And Will is online, correct? If you are, Will, unmute. Okay, can you provide some background, please?
For regional traffic data service, we have been providing traffic data services for the last 3 years in coordination with the city of Colorado Springs and El Paso County. We would like to have one RFP for contracts for similar traffic data services. They have in the past been provided by a company called Streetlight. Will be opening up, obviously, the Streetlight to compete and bid again, but we've got multiple other companies that are interested in bidding on this as well. The traffic data service provides not only traffic counts, but also information regarding the origin and destination of trips, routes for those trips, and can be used not just for surface transportation, but also to help understand transportation needs for multimodal, specifically for where we have private services, as well as for recreation trips. For example, Manitou Springs uses this service to help understand how many people not only are showing up to park and do the incline, but how many of them stay in the area to shop Manitou. Seen City of Colorado Springs use this service for similar analysis for some of their trip generators or attractors in the region, as well as helping to understand some of the congestion patterns that we see in certain projects or signal timing might be able to affect on those congestion patterns. So we have the recommendation from the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Community Advisory Committee service for all of our regional governments, and we're just looking for a resolution to allow us to do so.
Okay, are there any questions from any board members? Okay, seeing none, is there any questions from anyone in the audience? Okay, seeing none, what would the board like to do with this?
I would move approval of of adopting the resolution for this. John Graham.
Mayor Dixon, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approving the resolution for the procurement of the traffic data service. Is there any further deliberation? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And items, oh, I'm sorry, someone have something to say? Okay. And item 6, information items. Item 6A, Regional Visionings Survey Project, Pikes Peak Community Foundation, Margaret Dolan. And if you have any of your guests with you, please feel free to bring them down and introduce them.
Super. Come on up. Got a couple of members of my team here with me. This is Rob Fawnin. He's our Vice President of Asset Development and Donor Relations, and Bobby Baker, who is our Senior Director of Asset Development and Donor Relations. So thanks for being here, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good morning. Thank you very much for having us here. About 18 months ago, the Community Foundation took on an initiative to really sort of try and dive deep about what the priorities are for this region as determined by the residents. And so we analyzed about 50 strategic plans. Next slide. We pulled together a group of people to help with this effort because these are organizations that we consider key partners. So the Anschutz Foundation, the Chamber and EDC from Colorado Springs, the Colorado Springs Downtown Partnerships, El Pomar Foundation, Norwood, Office of the Mayor of Colorado Springs, the Community Foundation, of course, Pikes Peak United Way, Thrivers Foundation, and UCCS. Next slide, please. We had a team in that analyzed about 50 strategic plans that exist for this region in order to determine what are the common priorities that bubbled up in all of these plans. As we were validating, are these correct? Infrastructure, affordable and attainable housing, childcare, child development, pre-K through 12 education, mental health, and economic development. Are these things really right? We were privileged to be invited to be around your PPACG table around the Futures Forum. And as we started talking about air quality and transportation, we recognized that those things couldn't really be approached in isolation. It required a more comprehensive view of quality of life for our residents here in the region. And so, next slide, please. We formed sort of a core working group to explore further how we might go about that process. Matt Carpenter with El Pomar, myself, Andy with PPACG, and Tim Seibert, who's with Norwood Development Group and also board chair for the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. So with that as context and background, I'm going to have Dee Alsop, who is our lead principal consultant for the first phase of this work, come on and tell you a little bit about that stage of the process. Dee?
Thank you, Margaret, and I hope you can all hear me. My company's headquartered. And if you go to the next slide, please. Our objective here, Margaret, using here is, as Margaret has identified, you're really kind of at a unique point in time. You've had such remarkable economic growth, a lot of population growth. Yeah, because they start to bump into what people actually love about living in our area. And so really, the need is to find a way to continue planning and working towards a vision for the future that aligns with and supports value. So finding the right process and framework that have come in. If you go to the next slide again, please. What we found in the work that we've been doing in regional over the last 30 years is that, it's not enough to have great plans, strategies, and great leaders, great planners. Really, the most significant key is that to be sustainable, have to have their values met. And that just for the select few that have always been there, but it needs to be from all the folks from all walks of life. And if you go to the next slide, and that's really what this value-based regional provisioning now. It's an approach that what are the shared values that the people of the region associate with and what makes an ideal community. And once you identify what those core values are, the ones that are most strongly widely shared, then you use those what you're protecting, what you're promoting, and they also become a force to unify and motivate and inspire the public to get behind those efforts to work together to kind of create that future. Their values in the future that you're defining and building for them because it was based on their values. Next slide, please. And just a little bit about this approach of values. Years, and it's based on this idea. And those values that we have really we may disagree about little things about how the balance of our daily life, but ultimately the value about living in a region, our likelihood of having things that we all agree about across the different walks of life. Values. And those values didn't come shape, okay, what do we want? And then the other thing that right into that is when people that's a means of protecting this value, then they're far more likely to be able to support whatever that plan is. But they have values in those plans. And the last point about value-based strategies is that technology has demonstrated that our values endless years, we don't change them very much. They're very slow to change. That's a good stabilizing factor. That's built on values is going to be popping back and forth from time to time. It's very guideposts. Just a couple of pictures from this, and then we can answer any questions. If you go to the next one, as I mentioned, this is built on a long-range strategy. It's called means and theory or values-based theory. That is based on the idea that there are specific things, our physical environment about living in Pikes Peak region, and those things are important to connect to people's values. And so the core objective of research, of values-based research, is what are those benefits, consequences that connect to our values, and once we know them, then was a political strategist for President Ronald Reagan years ago. He had this idea that we persuade reason, but we motivate through emotion, tied into the real values that people share. And that's what drives this. The way this works when we do it is the design we have, go to the next slide, is based on region in which we say, what are all the things you love about living here? They will build us a list of many things. And they'll say, of all the things you've mentioned, pick the one that matters most to you. They'll identify one, and then I'll ask them, tell me why that particular thing matters so much. And they'll tell me of that. And what I'm doing is, if you look at this chart, I'm kind of moving from the bottom left to the upper. Why does that matter to you? What does that do? They reveal rational consequences, social benefits, and individual process called laddering. It's a very rigorous but process. It's very, very robust. And if you go to the next slide, this is kind of just an example of what kind of begins to emerge. We do this. This is from the Envision Utah project that we've done for them over the last 10 years, decades. But if you ask people what they love about living in Utah, if you push once on the slide, it will reveal the types of things that people mention. The lack of diversity and inclusion. Kind place, the safe neighborhood, and so forth. You can see about how many people identify that as their about living there. consequences of that. For example, scenic beauty has the ability to allow people to live healthy. You click it one more time, it now reveals what are kind of the emotions, greater personal enjoyment, peace of mind. And by doing this process, we reveal how living in this region, kind of quality of life, most meaningful and valuable to me. If you click it a couple more times around economic opportunity and affordability, outdoor recreation space, but the thing is this place where there's great values and this kind of friendly communities that create this kind of community and family around which most of the values for the region. That's kind of the digital framework that we're going to talk about things, we're not what we're really trying to protect, promote, and preserve. And that becomes exceptionally valuable in our regional visioning. And then if you just go a little bit forward, I'm Dr. Dion, the part of my strategies in the middle, but we're also working with she was kind of our on-the-ground facilitator in Nashville, where we just completed a regional vision project there. And she will be helping us, with the idea of how do on-the-ground organizations like yours and others get the most out of it. And our other partner working with me is Ari Rooney, who heads up Envision Utah. There's no greater and more experienced organizations in the country than Envision Utah that's been doing this type of regional vision. So that, let me just go ahead and stop and see if you might have any questions. Margaret or Lisa.
Madam Chair, if I could just real quick, really want to thank Margaret and the Community Foundation for stepping up and making this happen. She kind of alluded to the Regional Futures Forum group that we assembled very informally. We had a group of public sector, private sector, nonprofit, philanthropic folks that we got together, probably starting about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, to talk about, as Margaret alluded to, transportation and air quality and how do we manage those things within PPACG that are important to us, and also recognizing the growth that we're faced with. But we never really started those conversations with the thought that this is something that we were going to lead as PPACG, and came to realize it's probably best if government doesn't lead an effort like this. So we needed to find another partner that would step up and really take the reins. So really appreciate what Margaret has done, and we're really excited to be able to partner and help out in the effort. But this is a really big deal. It's been hugely successful in Envision Utah. You can look at 20 years later after they did their initial vision, where they've shown a reduction by following their vision versus the status quo that they've been able to reduce, say, vehicle miles of travel and improve air quality and improve the housing affordability mix and things like that. And Nashville just wrapped up or is in the process of wrapping up their process as well. So super excited about it. So appreciate the chance for us to kind of brief the board and now answer some questions.
And if I've got,
Go ahead.
parts. But when it comes to actually, so I thought there was a shared value. Those are all excellent questions. Map, and we let the people, those that we talk to, build the items that come into that map. And then we use those moving forward as the framework based on what we're hearing from the voice of the people. We bring up another important distinction, and we often get a different map when we talk to leaders in the region. And when you're talking to business leaders, you're clearly going to get priorities that they're focusing on, and those are going to be very much related to as their enterprises are. So in the process that we've defined, and they create kind of a base map that we work with, and then we supplement that with what we did when we go to the voice of the people. And being able to kind of compare gaps by which is also sometimes useful to do. And then you point to another thing that I think is very helpful. That what we often see is that there are points of great alignment. Areas where you're going to have the most success. You also have some areas of discongruity where there's great hope and aspiration, but great disappointment on those things. Those often are other areas that, for different strategic reasons, become ones that become a priority for the region to work with. And then you have a third category of things where there's great disagreement issues, and then that becomes a whole separate. Implement the issue, the level of disagreement, whether or not that becomes. Often those things are the much lesser important issues and priorities, and because they're less important, it's not worth the time to spend a lot of.
I wanted to jump in on that question. Can you go to the next one, if you have it? Yeah, so your question is very good, and it goes to how we will actually use this information. So phase one is that visioning, values, priorities exercise that Dee's talking about. It's very deep and very broad, and we expect to have zip code level information. It will not be the same 30 or 40 leaders that you always see in the room that come around these kinds of exercises. After we have those priorities, or maybe even as we start to get a glimpse of what those are, we're going to be doing some asset mapping to determine what organizations, what parts of government, what businesses are actually working against those priorities. And then we'll have a data tool to see where we are on those priorities. And then we'll be publishing those findings. This is not going to be a plan. You guys can use that information as you continue to work on things like transportation and air quality. The United Way can use this information as they look at things around health and human services. The organizations that are working on our outdoor spaces will continue their work based on this information that they now have. And we'll keep it going, which is why you see that rinse and repeat. This will not be a one-time only exercise. Utah has used the framework that we will be developing here to be able to survey people and find out how they feel about certain actions that might be taken. Policymakers, to your point about regulation in Colorado, we hope will use this information to guide their thinking. So it's not a plan, it's a useful tool that we hope people will use as they develop plans.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody else in the room or online?
Hi, I really appreciate this project. I just wanted to share that one of our council members had gone to the hospital and met a nurse there, a new nurse there. And the nurse had, and her family had visited Colorado Springs and fell in love with it. And I think some of the shared values are just the outdoors and not the extreme weather. I know our weather can change in the 4 seasons in one day, but it's not extreme, right? I mean, it's not so hot, it's not so cold. And she just fell in love with it, the outdoors. And I think those are some shared values. And I really appreciate this project, and it'll really give us that tool and the insight of where we all do come together, not where we're divided, but where we do come together. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. And our ask of you is, as we start to roll this out, we really are interested in hearing as many voices as we can. We want voices who disagree on things. We want people who agree on things and come together. But it's really important for our sampling to make sure that things are statistically sound, that we have a huge group of people responding. So as we come to you and ask you, do you know an organization who can get into this neighborhood or that neighborhood, we would really appreciate your help. And thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, did you have, you have two you want to give her? Okay.
Yeah.
Not like give her, not, but.
I will get it. See, I don't know. Yeah. Yes, I'd be happy to provide that. There's a couple of organizations in Southeast that are so key and so close to the community members there. Thank you.
Great. I'll be in touch. Thank you very
And
much.
just real quick, Margaret, I know when we met, we discussed your timeline and the difficulties of everybody's kind of on information overload. We just came out of the primary right now, and my phone is still blowing up with tons of texts every day that are going to spam. What is kind of your plan to kind of get through that noise that's going on right now?
Right. Good question. So we're in the planning stages right now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between Dee and his group and our little planning group to design the surveys, to figure out how we get into the neighborhoods. I would anticipate that we would be probably butting up against November election season, when we're out there, but maybe people will be hungry to have their voices heard. But any advice on that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you don't get it out by September, you might as well wait till after the election.
And we won't, we've got the holiday season to juggle. So yeah.
Yeah, but all right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank
I
you.
agree with everybody. I think this is exciting and it's going to be great information from us. So thank you very much. All right, barring any more questions, we'll move on. I am pausing a little extra because there's so many little buttons up here from people that are online. Give them a chance to respond. Okay. All righty, that takes us on to item 6B, Active Transportation Plan. Jason O'Brien.
Obviously, I'm not Jason O'Brien. Ted Richard with Olson. Jason is my client as we work on the Active Transportation Plan. The Active Transportation Plan, and you can go ahead to the next slide. Why are we doing one? Well, it is a component plan of the long-range regional transportation plan that's being developed right now. Other component plans include a regional transit plan. This is the LRTP is a mechanism for the region to consider funding priorities and identify projects for the TIP. The Active Transportation Plan is not specifically required, but based on input from member jurisdictions and the Transportation Advisory Committee, it was decided to undertake an Active Transportation Plan because it is recognized as a tool for pursuing funding. This plan does not replace or supersede any local planning efforts. We basically took input from all the member jurisdictions on what we looked at their plans and are in the basically have collated all the projects and recommendations that are in there. What we're trying to do is collect and organize those and identify any combinations of projects or enhancements that might serve a regional perspective. So very timely after our previous presentation here. So next slide, this project was launched about a year ago. We have completed much of the stakeholder and public engagement, the analysis, and we've drafted some conclusions and recommendations. We're now at a preliminary draft stage for the plan, and actually that's going out to the Transportation Advisory Committee for their internal review before we release a public draft. Next slide. I think I went through most of this, the background, how did we do this? It was guided by public input from the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory or Transportation Advisory Committee. Again, it's a synthesis of local planning efforts while we're considering a regional perspective. Some conclusions. Basically, where we're at is we believe that this active transportation plan should provide a toolbox for member jurisdictions to consider as they advance their own plans to help illuminate things that could help from a regional perspective. Again, this is very timely based on the previous presentation here. It also lets us pursue some regional benefits if we consider those. There are some aspirational elements identified in the plan, and I'll go through those in a little bit. And the plan also identifies some next steps. Next slide, please. So we had as we went through this process, there was certainly a lot of discussion about what exactly should the role of this plan be. Because local jurisdictions do their own plans and PPACG is not in the habit of developing new projects outside those plans, what is the role of this? What should we be doing with this plan? So we asked, well, what are some of the criteria for regional priorities? When the LRTP project lists were being developed, were there any maybe really aspirational projects that were held back because they would likely not be in that fiscally constrained list? Should we consider those? Can this plan identify new projects? Is that a role of this project? What kind of projects should those be if they were? And how do we compare those to the already identified local plans? So we asked that with our Transportation Advisory Committee. We went through a detailed workshop with them, and we came up with some conclusions. On the next slide, some of the outcomes from that workshop and input we got from the public was that if we were to identify regional type actions, some of the things we heard, it's almost those values that we just heard in the last presentation. What do people value from an active transportation standpoint? And it's very much the same thing you think about when you're driving your car. You're looking for connectivity. You're looking, do the facilities take you to the places you want to go? You're looking for continuity. You're looking for comfort. You want a safe drive, same as you want a safe bike or trail experience. You're also looking for clarity. You don't want to be confused by wayfinding or stuff that's not informative. So the other outcome was that, yes, the TAC felt we could identify new projects. It would not replace any local projects in the funding stream, but should maybe be considered as part of this toolbox. And those projects should either enhance a regional function or look to combine local projects into something that might be more competitive for funding. The plan should also consider non-infrastructure strategies, whether it be certain funding pursuits, policies, or other actions that provide a regional benefit. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about connectivity. So one of the things that we've done is we've identified, based on the input from the CAC, the TAC, public input, we've identified what we're calling a regional active transportation network. These are planned, already constructed, and missing segments of a regional trail network. It also identifies complementary, or there can also be complementary infrastructure, such as the sidewalks and on-street facilities, intersection improvements that would facilitate access to this regional network. Let's talk about continuity a little bit on the next slide. Continuity, one of the things that we asked the TAC, it's something that this board could provide some input on, is if you're thinking about continuity, a lot of our trail systems, as they go through different jurisdictions, they change dramatically. What could be a paved trail, easy family access in one jurisdiction, as it crosses into another, it could become an unimproved trail, more suitable for advanced riders. So, and up here are examples of some of the cross sections of the trails from different jurisdictions. You can see that they range everything from, in the county, and it's appropriate that these be context specific, but is there a desired minimum cross section that we want to talk about for this? If there is a regional network that should have some priority, is there a desired minimum cross section? And also, are there programmatic strategies such as sidewalk enhancements or something that can provide a regional benefit? Comfort was the other value, if I can steal that term again. People value comfort. The plan outlines some of these things, again, as tools that for local jurisdictions to consider. Comfort is about personal safety. It's about amenities. Does your trail system function for all types of users? And then also just system condition. Do we pay the same attention to our trail system and those users as we do to our roads and streets? And last, let's talk about clarity. Clarity, for purposes of this discussion, is about, one, establishing a common language. We think that would provide a regional benefit. For example, just on the different trail maps that exist within local jurisdictions, they define things different ways, whether it be a tier 1 trail in the county, a primary trail in the city of Fountain, and other definitions in other jurisdictions. It would help the user, who's often jurisdiction agnostic or ignorant, better understand what exactly their journey will look like. And then also, I think something that we're adding as a tool in the plan is thinking about common policies. For example, different jurisdictions have different rider regulations and also equipment restrictions. Where are e-bikes or scooters, those sorts of things allowed? And that could be considered as part of that common language when you're defining what this trail system looks like. And lastly, of course, is wayfinding. Different jurisdictions provide different levels of wayfinding. Trail names often change as you cross jurisdictions, which can be confusing to these users. So some of the policies and programs that we are identifying in the plan that might be of interest from a regional perspective. I think our CAC actually asked us about, well, what about just the common or the normal pedestrian trying to walk a few blocks on a sidewalk? How does this plan address those? This was a challenge for us when we think of a regional perspective, because sidewalk needs at specific locations are not inherently regional. A lot of that is already planned locally. Colorado Springs has a pretty aggressive missing sidewalk program that they continue to pursue. And those programs can actually be an important funding strategy, and it's something else that could be considered from a regional perspective. For example, that opens the door for different funding pursuits. If you think about multi-jurisdictional support for some type of sidewalk program that either enhances overall pedestrian accessibility for a variety of reasons, whether it be better pedestrian access to our transit stops and stations, or for reasons of equity, investing in sidewalks where people most need them, or for enhancing certain destinations that provide an economic and quality of life benefit for all of us. Other policies that could be considered include, the role of parking. Yes, people that drive cars at the beginning and end of every trip, they are pedestrians. And so different parking or prioritization programs may be of regional value. One of the other things that we talked about quite a bit was with this plan was, and this will be, I hope, the only time you see aspirational in this presentation, but we like to do plans that get built inherently. And we felt like we should at least open the discussion to what is a reasonable time frame for making some of these investments. Because this was kind of a 20-year look ahead, that's kind of what we established as a reasonable deadline for completing these regional corridors. And then with some interim milestones there for, planning what the effort is required, establishing some minimum connectivity for this regional trail network. The next slide, again, with most planning efforts, we talk about prioritization. Again, this is not about supplanting local plans and your own priorities, but for certain funding streams, identifying a very short list of what our regional priorities is required. CDOT or some other agency may ask us, well, what are your top 2 priorities that we can invest in from an active mode perspective? On the map there, you see highlighted 4 corridors that we identified as likely candidates for regional prioritization. That includes the Midland Corridor, Platte Avenue, Rock Island Railroad Trail all the way out to Falcon. That's kind of the Peaks to Plains corridor. Obviously the Pikes Peak Greenway, the Sand Creek Trail, and the Stapleton Briargate corridor. We thought this provided a nice backbone if you're thinking of a regional trail system. Obviously, it doesn't mean all the attention should focus on those, but if somebody asks us what are our regional priorities, we think these are good candidates. And those corridors, the way they're identified, they still identify there's multiple projects within those corridors and there's multiple jurisdictions served. Just one more slide, and that is what is our next steps? As I said, the TAC is reviewing our draft plan right now. The plan is to incorporate comments received from them and put out a public review draft in August. We'll be doing informal updates with the CAC and the TAC, and then we would likely come back before this board in September, October for adoption or approval. Any questions that I can answer?
Commissioner Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Eric Stone, Teller County. Question I have is, as we look at the plan, what's existing, what's future, and of course, what's aspirational. At what point does the aspirational tie into the realities of usership of existing? And when we look at the map there, and somebody brought it up earlier in the meeting about, creating bike corridors, I think it was Commissioner Vanderwerf brought up, that creating active, transportation pathways, for example. I'm sure he's probably speaking of like Cascade, Avenue here in Colorado Springs.
Right.
To what is the usage there? What is the, as we look towards the aspirational, look towards the future, and then envisioning, as we can envision all day long, but if not utilized, is it the best use of taxpayer funding? So how much of the plan that's going to be presented looks at what is existing and the usage of what is existing in regards to then recommendations for future expansion or aspirational projects?
A great question. I'll have probably a little bit of a multi-part answer. We understand, that balance between investments and where people are or how people are moving around now and how they might like to. The aspirational elements are there for to convey again what we're hearing in terms of what is the community value. And I know there's different audiences in the community, and some of the questions on the last presentation touched on that. This regional network that's identified here, if we were to be aspirational, these are off-roadway facilities. So whether it be our existing trail system that's off-roadway, whether it be adjacent to the roadway with multi-use paths, it's the same thing we do when we're planning major arterials for roadways, we're trying to create a grid system or a system whereby people can get reasonably close to their destinations on these facilities for this mode of travel.
Yeah, I think that mostly answers the question. I think at what point, and I realize state makes funds available for certain things because the state wants certain things, and so we do a lot of our planning based upon wanting to get our share of a pie sometimes. And improve recreational opportunities. There are certain areas where you can visually see, you're driving by, I-25 up north by the Air Force Academy, and you look at some of the trails up there, heavily used, actively used. I think there are lots of areas around the area where you do get really significant use. But just as you look at some of these, partially completed, like this corridor between Woodland Park, for example, and Manitou Springs, there are pieces of that already exist. I don't know how well they're used. I'm not sure how much the roughly 2,500 elevation gain plays into that level of use. That's probably not an easy ride, whether you're doing it, by bicycle or others, transportation modes. That's a bit of a challenge, but. Anyway, I guess where I'm getting to with this is in adopting this is that at what level is historic usage of these types of pathways go into the recommendations for what is in the future or even aspirational?
If I may, Madam Chair, Commissioner Stone, my voice. Oh, there we go. It really goes back to the jurisdictions, right? At no point do we force a jurisdiction to put anything in the plan? And even then, how they want to bring their projects into the plan is up to them. There are some jurisdictions that might say, hey, if we build it, they will come. There will be other jurisdictions that say, we're not going to put anything in here that isn't already used and is used so heavily that it needs to be upgraded. So it really is up to the individual jurisdiction to have that sort of internal sort of decision process as to what they want to bring into the process. Obviously, with some of the jurisdictions, there is a philosophical chat about, well, the money's there or it's not there, and if it's there, how do we make sure we get our fair share? So what we try to provide as a region is that vehicle for those individual jurisdictions to have those projects identified so they do have a better chance of receiving funding if that jurisdiction chooses to go after it. So hopefully that helps answer your question as far as this is a vehicle that we provide to the jurisdictions, but at no time do we decide what we're going to go after and when we're not. And then we also have Jason, but maybe I answered it for him.
Yeah, thank you. That does answer my question a lot.
That's what I
Thank
thought
you.
you were getting at, so that's why I ran up here.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason online.
I would just give the perspective that all of the, well, first of all, are originated. Second, this is actually areas of other imagine much more production of those process that's values and that perspective. Possible projects.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, and this might be more of an Andy question. We do a lot of studies, and we don't want to spend a lot of money and time on them and have them end up on the shelf. What is the plan to get this study out, to add it to the toolkit box to the different members of PPACG so that they're aware of this study?
I think the staff members that are most closely linked to it are definitely aware. John, come on down because you're probably in a better shape position to answer this, working with the TAC and the CAC and other members. And as Ted mentioned, it's part of our long-range transportation plan. It's going to roll up into that effort, and it's in effect for, I'm not sure how many years, but it's our roadmap, guide map, trail map, if you will, for our jurisdictions to use for a number of years at least. But John?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We are here as a vehicle to make sure that the projects that come forward from the jurisdictions have the best chance of moving forward and getting funding. So it kind of splits into two sort of spheres at that point. First off, El Paso County and Colorado Springs, you know, they're the big gorillas. They've got lots of staff. For the most part, all they need from us is, hey, it needs to be listed in a plan so I can go after federal funds, or it needs to be listed in a plan and shows the connectivity with the rest of the network so I can go after League of American Bicyclists grant, or I can go after this other grant, right? There's different pots of money that we help those guys with. For the smaller jurisdictions, obviously they don't have the same staff capabilities, right? So we try to not only put the plan together to help them go after those funds when they have a chance, but also help them identify some stuff to put into the plan in the first place to make sure that everything's covered. So from our perspective, I think to answer your question, is for the little smaller jurisdictions, we're making sure that we help identify some concepts, get them in there so that they can go after some other funding to maybe make them become a reality. For the bigger guys, it's making sure that we check all the boxes to move forward. So that's a very long way of saying we try to make the plans more than just a doorstop. But ultimately, the effectiveness is up on the individual jurisdictions to say, yes, that's the plan I want to go after and go after it. Now, outside of transportation, you know, we do have Karen Rowe, our grant navigator. So we're happy to help people with that.
I wasn't going down the grant path with my question.
Okay.
So I'm going to interrupt you just a
No,
little
sure.
bit. Sorry. The one that I think kind of jumped out at me was the need for continuity. I'll never forget the time I was in Moab, Utah, and I took my kids for a hike, and on their chart it was a level 1, so I took off with a 3-year-old, and next thing I know, I'm on the edge of a cliff trying to navigate something. It was obviously not a level 1, in my opinion, you know, trail, right? And so did a lot of carrying that I didn't anticipate doing. So how do we get that continuity of, like you said, just the terms that people are using? Some of you started off on a level 1 trail, and all of us, and I know trails change along the way, but how do we work with our regional to make this a true regional effort on some of those issues?
And what we do is we can provide that toolbox so that jurisdictions can use that toolbox to have continuity of language, and actually what that means is in terms of the language when people go out there. But again, that is purely voluntary, right? So we can do the toolbox, and if a jurisdiction steps forward and says, we don't like your term, we don't like the way you've done this, they're free to do that. We have no authority to tell any jurisdiction what to do. But that being said, we try to make it easy for any jurisdiction to say, well, this just makes more sense, and they've done all the heavy lifting for us. Why not use the toolbox and use that strategy? Am I missing anything?
I would just add, I mean, if that's something the board would like to convene that discussion with member jurisdictions about how to do some of these things, I mean, I would think that's something that we could facilitate.
Okay. All right. I just don't like to see stucco on the shelf. I don't
Yeah,
think
so-
any of us, I
but,
don't
you
think
know,
any of us do, right?
Back in Arizona, the Maricopa Association Gumbers, which was Phoenix, had what they called the MAG standards, right? So they would come up with all sorts of standards for roadway sections and drainage and ways of doing scuppers and spandrels and all those sorts of things. But even at the end of the day, as a regional organization, the MAG standards, every jurisdiction still had to voluntarily adopt those standards. So we're happy to put anything in place that you want, but at the end of the day, it'll be up to the individual jurisdictions to adopt that. But if you guys want us to do more and have more things, more toolboxes for different stuff, we have the capability of doing that, and we're happy to do so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions or
Yep,
comments?
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes.
If I may, first off, I like this idea very much of integrating a system between the jurisdictions, giving us some options. Certainly in Manitou Springs, we'd like to have some signage that, is user-friendly to folks who are coming out from Colorado Springs and vice versa. So I think this is a good step forward. I guess I would also be looking for some general kind of financial information. You have it to give us an idea of what a 6x20 parking pad for bicycles should cost, something like that, because we're a small town and the consultants come in and they tell us it should be $125,000 or some preposterous number. I have no idea. I'm using that as an example, but it really seems like we get gouged, and I think other small jurisdictions are in a similar situation. So if we had a range of realistic costs, that'd help us a lot in planning and also I think in spending money wisely. And I guess one example I'd give that's tangentially related would be with a bicycle program that we help fund based on what we paid previous year and the use. We basically are subsidizing electric bikes by almost $22 a ride, which to me is not sustainable. We're not solving a problem. We're using up resources and giving up our opportunity to solve the problem in the future. So some directives, some general guidelines would be, I think, very helpful, particularly to the smaller jurisdictions.
I think that's a great point. There is a section in the plan on funding strategies, but I think that's something we can consider is looking at just some of those general cost information to your first point.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you.
information. Obviously of interest to everybody, right? All right. That takes us on to item 6C, air quality update. Mr. Gunning.
I'm going to jump up here real quick for this. I appreciate the opportunity to give just a pretty brief update on where we are with some of our air quality conversations and next step that we're anticipating that we're going to take. Those of you that are kind of newer to this conversation, there are 6 regulated pollutants by EPA. We're good with 5 of them, but the one around ground level ozone, we're right on the edge and potentially could be reclassified as non-attainment here in the coming years. And we all agree that it's a public health concern. It impacts very young kids, our elderly adults, and especially others with underlying respiratory conditions and things like that. So we totally get that it's a public health standard and we need to do our best to reduce our emissions. We don't want to end up in non-attainment because that means at least roughly 20 to 25 year of additional regulatory requirements that we'd have to go through, like vehicle emissions testing, tailpipe testing on an annual basis, potentially. If we recruit, say, a new microchip technology business, they would have to do offsets for the emissions that they generate, and not just 1-to-1, but usually like 1.5-to-1. So it's got some impacts from that standpoint. Potentially impacts operations in Teller County around mining operations and things like that. So it really would be impactful for, like I mentioned, about a 20 to 25 year period. Our 2 biggest sources that we generate within our region that create ground level ozone are in the transportation sector, tailpipe emissions, and energy production. And I'd actually say that I think we're doing a really good job. There's a lot more we could be doing in those spaces, but between state requirements and federal requirements, I think we're doing a good job. I don't have the ability to really demonstrate how much emissions have gone down in those two sectors, but just given all the state requirements and others that are out there, I think we're doing a really good job in those two sources. The problem is, and we've talked about this before here, is that about 80% of our ozone emissions that go into our two monitors are outside of our control. It's emissions that come in from other parts of the state into our region. They come from other states into Colorado, or they even come internationally. Also includes wildfire smoke that we have, very little control over. We're doing a really good job in our region around wildfire mitigation, but we're impacted by smoke that travels further distances, whether it's from California or Canada, or you name it. We're impacted by a lot of different dynamics. We're also impacted just based on our geography and our climate here within the Intermountain West, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past as well. So one of the things that we've done is that we've pulled together a group of similar regions that are also impacted in the Intermountain West. You'll recall maybe the letter that we sent last year, signed by our board chair, Mayor Thompson, that we sent off to EPA to put this on EPA's radar. Other regions across the Intermountain West were doing the same thing in Phoenix and Salt Lake City and Boise, Idaho, and a few others. So I think we've done a good job at least raising the concern with EPA to get it on their radar. But the challenge we're having right now is we need them to take the next step and take a little more ownership around the issue and actually start studying it and getting a better understanding of the science behind ozone formation within our region. One thing that helped as well is that I think it was in April, and I think the letter is in your packet as well, is that governors from 4 of our states sent a letter to President Biden and to EPA. Thank you, Jared. Yes, it was in April, around these same issues that we've been raising as a squeaky wheel here in the Intermountain West part of the country, and basically identified a whole series of things that they would like EPA to start to give us permission on, like somehow excluding wildfire impacts that we have no control over, doing something about international emissions, and just some of those other things that are tied up within the Federal Clean Air Act. Unfortunately, I think you've got the response that came back from EPA to the governors as well. Not really satisfying, in some ways a little bit dismissive. They acknowledge it again, but sort of treat it as, well, that's your issue in Utah, and we'll work with Salt Lake City, or that's your issue in Phoenix, and you should deal with your state and federal folks there. And they're really not grasping that it's an issue that does cut across, a number of states that I've mentioned already, the 4 corner states, plus a handful of others like Nevada and Idaho, that were really kind of tied together and had the same dynamics. So we think that's really been missing from EPA's responses so far. We had a really good meeting of our peers the end of May, I think it was May 31st in Phoenix, an in-person meeting with folks from Salt Lake City, Phoenix, obviously, Idaho, great representation from up and down the Front Range as well. Basically an all-day session to really strategize about, okay, where do we go from here? How do we really make this stick with EPA, while also recognizing that no surprise, 2024 is an election year, so we can't go in with great aspirations around EPA embracing improvements and fixes at this point, when they realize that there could be changes in administration or changes in Congress and so forth. But what we all universally agreed to is that we need to make a firm request to EPA asking for them to study the science behind ozone formation, why it's different in the Intermountain West, and really start to take some ownership around it. We think that's really been lacking. There are kind of EPA adjacent studies that have been done by different research groups and universities and others, but EPA itself has not really studied this issue quite yet. So we're in the process of drafting up a letter, and Jared's pulling it up on the screen right now, that we're proposing that we sign by all the executive directors within these regions across the Intermountain West. Been working closely with my counterpart in Phoenix and Salt Lake City, especially, kind of the 3 of us with our technical experts drafted up a letter that really gets to the heart of what we think is missing from EPA's perspective. We're going to need help from a political standpoint as well, but we're trying not to make this a political and a partisan request by any means. It's a technical, science-based request for them to study the science. But we're going to need help from our federal delegation to really lean into this as well, to put some pressure on EPA and also make an appropriation in a budget process, hopefully coming up soon, to set aside the money to help us with that request. One last thing I think I'll mention, let's go to the very last page of this letter, Jared. There's a graph in here. Unfortunately, it doesn't include Colorado Springs regional data here in the Pikes Peak area because we're not in non-attainment. But this identifies, it's a little bit cumbersome, but I can send this out, but it identifies the 4 non-attainment areas across the Intermountain West with their trend line, the lines with the little dots that you can see what's been happening there with emissions. And that includes Denver and the North Front Range area, Phoenix is in there, Salt Lake City, and Las Vegas. So the 4 that are in non-attainment right now. The bar charts that you see are showing reductions in emissions that they're creating within their regions. And this really kind of points out the disconnect where regionally they're reducing emissions in all those sectors. They have the similar sectors that I mentioned earlier with transportation and energy production. So what's happening in their communities is going down, but their ozone levels that are read at their monitors is going up and is not being affected whatsoever. So we think this speaks volumes to what EPA really needs to grasp and get a better understanding around to study what's going on out here. And then down the road, the next step after that would be to help us find some solutions as to how we can deal with this across our, like I said, our Intermountain West region. So wanted you to be aware, we're in the process of finalizing this letter. It's going to be signed just by the executive directors. Like I said, we didn't really want to make this a political request, so we're kind of keeping the elected officials out of it as far as signing on to it right now. But we are going to want to engage with our federal delegation members, and we can talk more about how we can make that happen here in the coming months, because we'll need their help as well. So I just wanted to give you an update on where we are. This letter has just come together in the past couple of days, actually, and I'm happy to send this out so everybody's got a copy of it, and we can talk about it further next month. Our hope is to finalize it in August and send it off. So if folks have any questions or suggestions, we still have opportunities for that as well. Okay, but thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I've got for now. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions from anyone in the room? Anyone online? Yeah, that letter that came back from, I think it was the EPA. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Not great. No, I think dismissive was a good word that you used.
Dismissive of the 4 governors, and there are other opportunities where the governors are working together and helping us out on this issue, which we really appreciate, but surprisingly dismissive. So clearly we've done a good job, I think, over the past year to raise the issue, and now we just need to have them take the next step.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Very
All
good.
right, thank you very much. All right, barring any further questions or comments, that takes us on to item 6D, building update. Ms. McBroom.
Carol McBroom, PPACG, Finance Director. And before I start on the building update, I'd like to follow up with Mayor Dixon that next month we will be doing a work plan update, and that'll include the first 6 months of the year. It'll be a kind of high-level overview of all the programs, but it will also include analysis of revenue and expenses. So I kind of feel like it's going to answer what you are looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, so building update. We are in this beautiful room today because our PPACG building is closed to upgrade the air handling system. Project is going great, on schedule. They're working on the demolition now, and then within the next couple of weeks, they'll start putting in the new system. So we're excited about that. We had a great discussion last month about financing. The project is about $1.2 million. We have some ARPA funding of $485,000 that we're applying against the building. And we were discussing how we were going to cover the remaining $650-ish thousand because we did not get the grant that we were hoping for. So you voted and you requested that we go forward with a line of credit, which I found out that was approved today. So we will move forward with the line of credit. You did ask me to come back to follow up on how we were going to replenish the 17% cash reserve, and you asked me to recommend a policy for the line of credit threshold. So I created some spreadsheets to help answer that question. And the first one is this cash flow analysis. And so what I'm trying to show you here is we have actuals for May and June, and then I projected out the remaining of the year. And I think what's important to get from this spreadsheet is our expenses. So we basically float $1 million every month. We pay out with payroll, wages, benefits, and then all other expenses that occur for each grant. And since we are basically funded with reimbursable grants, there's a time frame where we are just floating on average $1 million a year. So that's really what I wanted you to see here. And then based on projections, at the end of the year, our cash on hand will be less than $1 million, which will be important in a second. So the second spreadsheet is you asked me to kind of estimate how long it would take for us to repay the cash reserve of the $665,000, which will be going into the air handling project. And I'm estimating a 5-year payback, assuming that we increase our net assets by $150,000 a year, which has been the average. I looked at the average over the last 7 years, and on average, we increased net assets by $150. So using the $150, I'm suggesting that it'll take us 5 years to repay what we are putting into the air handling system. So the next slide is just a simplified. It just shows you where our cash is based on the month and what I'm projecting. It's just a simplified version. And the last slide, a question was asked last month about the lowest amount that we've had in our account. And so I wanted to put that in a visual. And so back in November of 2023 was the lowest that I have seen in the account. And I am projecting that at the end of this year, with the payout of the 650-ish for the air handling system, our account will be at about $849,000. So my suggestion for a threshold to be used with the line of credit is that you allow me to use it once the account hits $1 million or less. That $1 million is our kind of buffer to pay for any months that will be coming forward, and that just will ensure that we can continue the processing of our organization. I also am suggesting that I look at any amount over $1 million that's in the account for more than 5 business days, and that will be the funds that I will use to pay down the line of credit. So any questions?
Thank you for getting this. I know that was a lot of information.
Sure.
And, different ideas. Yes.
Thank you, Carol, very much. And by the way, you've got an email in your inbox with the approval of the last check.
Thank you.
But from a risk standpoint, you're recommending a $1 million floor on those essentially operating reserves. From a risk standpoint, with the line of credit there and available, and I'm just thinking it from a business standpoint and wanting to minimize the amount of interest you pay on anything, I guess the straightforward question is, what is the risk, say, for example, if instead of $1 million, that number was $500,000? Knowing that the line of credit is there, should there be a need to go to any one of those levels, whether it's 1 million or 500,000, is I guess where I'm getting to is at what point to exercise the necessity of accessing the line of credit and paying interest on that. Whereas there's kind of 2 different levels I look at. One's comfort, and one is is risk. So at a comfort level, I think, we'd all be very comfortable with the idea of when we dip below $1 million, that we dip into the line of credit and then pay it back with excess revenues above $1 million. But then when you compare comfort to risk, is what is the risk of if that number was 500,000, where we never had to pay any interest and never dip below the 500,000, we never had a cash flow issue, and if there was a cash flow issue as it went closer, we have a line of credit. So I guess I think there's a question in there, but and I guess that question is that what is the risk? Well, if you were to set that number at a $500,000 versus $1 million, do we have a risk of not being able to make payroll, of not being able to pay for programs, knowing that the line of credit is there, ready and available? I don't know what the time frame is for transfer out of that, but if you could address that, please, I would appreciate it.
Sure. I mean, that was part of the conversation that Andy and I have. And I think the risk reward for me was we will be able to pass on some of these expenses into our indirect rate that we charge to our grants. So I felt like that gain would help with that risk reward decision. But because yes, we will be paying interest on the loan, on this line of credit that, when we do use it. But I do get to pass it on. I will at some point be able to use it as a revenue against the grants that we have. So I appreciated the fact that I appreciate the fact that we have money in the bank, and I wanted to ensure that I knew that we have $1 million that needs to be available for expenses, and that we only have $600,000 on a line of credit. I wanted to ensure that we had money available to continue processing our organizational expenses. So anyway, that's where the $1 million came from. Risk reward. And I do get to charge the interest back to our grants.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Because it's an information item, so we're not making a decision today. And are we going to get these slides sent to us?
Oh, sure. They're in the packet, but we can send them out. We'll send them out electronically as well. And I think back to your question, Commissioner Stone, is that for now, this is a good direction to move forward, maintaining the $1 million balance and so forth. But we're going to flesh this out further, and we're hoping after the building project is done, because Carol and Cheryl have been taking the lead with that, is that we need to develop some financial policies or update our financial policies, which are embarrassingly old. And we need to address that very issue. So I think that'll be a good chance for us to have these ongoing conversations about approval processes and what's the right reserve amount and so forth, and what to do with the backstop line of credit if we have to tap into it and so forth. So we'll keep this on the radar for sure. Yeah, and we might want to check in with our auditors as well and find out from their perspective, do they see any risk? I mean, we're not floating any bonds, so our bond rating, we don't have one. But do they see other risk potentially if we do dip below a prescribed amount within our reserve fund, and maybe get some guidance from their standpoint?
Okay. All right, any questions online? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. All right. That takes us on to item 7, other reports and minutes. And before we go into that, Andy and I would like to discuss some changes that are occurring on the board as a result of some changes within Colorado Springs. And we're not going to get into a discussion of that, but just how that affects us as PPACG. So, and I have spoken to both of the individuals, and Andy and I discussed this, and we won't be acting on this today. Obviously, this is just an information item, but a couple of suggestions that we do have for the board that we'll talk about more at the next meeting is I have discussed it with Commissioner Stone if he would be interested in stepping into the second vice chair position, and he is willing to step into that position if the board agrees to that. Also spoke to Mayor Case in Woodland Park, and with her financial background in municipal government, would she please be willing to step into the treasurer position? And she has agreed to that. And so that would leave an opening on the board for the secretary. And that position would be open to anyone on the board who is a voting member, the primary member. And so if you are interested in being the secretary, assuming everybody agrees to those decisions that Andy and I, suggestions that Andy and I discussed, then if you're interested in being the secretary, please send your interest to Andy, and he will collect those names, and then we will discuss that, those and at the next board meeting. And so if anybody has any comments or suggestions to make on that today, we're open to that. But Commissioner Stone, I believe you agreed to step
Yes,
into that
that's
role?
correct.
Okay. All right. And then Kelly, I don't know if Kelly Kate is still online or not, but I did have a conversation with her and she was willing to do that also. And okay. All right. Thank you. And then was there another board position? I can't remember. STAC. The way that the STAC representation also is done is Holly is the primary member on STAC, and that leaves the open position for the second member on STAC, and then John Leosados is the third member on STAC. And we have a whole ton of members on that board because we're not limited on how many people can be on that board and then get the materials and keep up to date on what's going there. So that would also be up for discussion. Andy, if you could maybe email out the current STAC positions of where everybody's at, and if you're interested in moving up on the STAC board to that second voting position, you also could let Andy know that, and that we could discuss that at the next meeting also.
Yes.
Okay. And I do have one comment. I have a couple comments up here. I'm going to go with Councilmember Avila first, and then Mayor Dixon.
Is this on? Yeah. So is there anyone from Colorado Springs on the executive board right now?
So there was, Dave Donaldson was in the second vice chair position, right?
So,
and yeah.
I'm just going to say that I served as second chair before, and I think it's really important to have someone from Colorado Springs on that. I wish I would have kind of known about this, but we'll have a broader discussion about that later. And it would not involve a lot of moving around.
Okay. That's another option too. Okay, Mayor Dixon?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could get kind of roles, responsibilities, and time commitment for the various positions, the anticipated at least, sent out with that message.
Okay. And these positions would only be through the end of the year, right? Because the board positions roll over in January. So, yep. And
yes, we will send that out. And the board did adopt, it was a couple of years ago now, policy for selecting board officers, just a page and a half description of what the different roles are, but they're also described in the bylaws. I'll send all that out after the meeting so folks have a kind of an expectation of what the different positions are. And then we'll put it on the agenda for August. Yes.
okay. All right, thank you very much. And I do want to welcome our newest board member. I don't think we officially voted you in yet, but sitting here today is Councilmember Tallarico from Colorado Springs. So thank you for being on the board. Thank you. All righty. Okay, so run all those things through Andy if you're interested in any of those positions or have any suggestions. And of course, I'm always open to phone calls too. That'd be great.
If I may?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just welcome to our new board member. And I know we've discussed over the years, generally, we have different times when people come on because of different timings of municipal elections. Obviously, we're kind of midstream here with a new board member, but you're probably already on it. I just wanted to recommend, we talked about the educational piece of bringing the new board member up to speed of the incredible breadth of activities and responsibilities that this board has, and making sure that we're not just welcoming and then letting them swim in deep water, is to make sure that they kind of are fully briefed on not only what we do, but kind of processes, and because we do everything from 20-year plans to shorter things, and I don't know, you may be very familiar with a lot of these regardless, but I think it's our responsibility as both a board and you as executive director that when people come in, that we do make sure that they get fully briefed and they're not just kind of looking around wondering what's going on.
Very, very good points, all. And welcome, council member. We have not had a chance to really chat about who we are and why we're here and what your role is today, but certainly I'll reach out. I've attempted to reach out to, we have 2 relatively new mayors as well in Teller County, in Cripple Creek and Victor. So we have a kind of a new cohort of folks, and maybe if we can do a group orientation, or if it's individual, we will make that happen. Absolutely.
I look forward to any and all educational opportunities. Thank you.
You sure about that? Yeah. Okay. All righty. That takes us on to item 7, other reports and minutes. Let's see, CDOT.
Good morning, Board. Shane Ferguson with CDOT. I'll give a quick, brief update and then turn it over for John to discuss our current projects. I just want to remind everybody that we are in the middle of our heavy construction season, so just be aware of the cone zone, if you will. There's quite a bit of activity out there, and just want to be sure that our brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters can come home safely at night every night after they get done with their work. Secondly, CDOT is pursuing county meetings coming up over the next couple of months, where we'll be meeting with jurisdictions to discuss the state of the state, if you will, or state of the region, if you will. Park and Teller County will be joining Central Front Range's meeting. I believe that is in August. And then considering El Paso County is split between PPACG as well as Central Front Range, we're doing a separate meeting for El Paso County. That meeting date is yet to be determined, but we are looking in late August, early September. So with that, I will turn it over to John to discuss our current projects.
Thank you, Chair, board members. We have the usual slide, the active construction projects right now within PPACG or basically touching PPACG, as shown. The MAMSIP project on I-25 Fillmore to Garden of the Gods. We have ADA ramp reconstruction throughout the area, Fountain, Colorado Springs, Monument, and Palmer Lake. US 24 pedestrian improvements between 8th and 31st, region-wide signal replacement and pavement marking, and the Colorado 115 project on the west side of Fort Carson. 2 other projects just of note within Central Front Range. It's on a second slide, but I'll just brief them right now. 9 and 285 reconstruction there in Fairplay, and Colorado 9 and US 285 chain-up stations. That project is still technically not complete because of we're waiting on some parts that only have 2 manufacturers in the United States. So I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions or anything on the active projects, and then I'll move on. So in terms of new construction projects that are kicking off, obviously the most important and interesting one, and I'm back on the first slide, is Powers and Airport Interchange. Baptist Road and Terrazzo Roundabout has also kicked off, and so now really these are active projects too, but they've just started in the last month or so. I-25 resurfacing, what we call Midway, basically down by the power plant to the Pueblo County line roughly. US 24 resurfacing from east of Falcon through east of Peyton has also kicked off. Again, that's technically for the most part in the Central Front Range area. Signal replacements up at Woodland Park, also ongoing. That's having a little bit of a pause while they wait on the steel supplies, the actual signals themselves to get installed. And US 85 Carson Boulevard in Fountain, making that a continuous green T intersection for northbound, is in the stages of just kicking off. It's been awarded. As far as in the Central Front Range greater area, some additional projects, US 50 resurfacing, Salida to Coaldale, 115 and 50 roundabout there at that interchange is actually nearing completion already. US 24, that was a short project. US 24 resurfacing, I already discussed that. So these other projects on this one I've already discussed. Again, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions on any of the projects.
I just have one quick question. Once that roundabout is finished in Fremont County, is Commissioner McFall going to get special lessons on how to operate his vehicle within that, or? Sorry, for those that aren't part of the Central Front Range TPR, this has been
I'm not sure if I
Commissioner
should make
McFall's
a-
biggest point of contention is he doesn't like roundabouts.
I just want to know if we can get the contractor from the Air Force Academy to complete the roundabouts in 3 weeks.
I know.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
It's interesting you say that. It is much easier to complete a project when you shut down the road, when you shut down all traffic. So that's, I think, as much as I'm sure that they're doing a great job with phasing that too, that's also a luxury that regrettably most highway projects don't have.
Just gives us a something to tease y'all about, so.
Yeah. You can reconstruct an intersection in roughly a month, and under a month if you really shut everything down, but it's difficult if you don't. And then back to the first slide, just planned 2025 projects that I think are of particular interest. 115 resurfacing Nelson Boulevard, Gate 1 there to Brookside, so basically up to I-25. 67 north of Woodland Park that I'm actually going to be working with the TAC here in the coming week to just try to start laying out the funding options to re-advertise that project, so pending funding. And US 24 resurfacing Florissanta Divide. Again, that's technically in the Central Front Range area, but I know Commissioner Stone, obviously, that's one that you've mentioned on occasion. And just FYI, in the mix too, in Central Front Range for 2025, we should be resurfacing 285 up in Bailey. So I'll just open it up to any questions overall.
Any questions? Anybody online?
Thank you.
I do have a question, and this may fall as Shane. I don't know. I know y'all are aware of what happened with us in our construction on 85 and our intersection over the railroad and the wide loads. We were trying to do lane striping, and we had 15 wide loads go through in 2 days where we had to move all the cones and stop the striping. And I think I brought it up last month that it's come to our attention that those oversized load permits are given out a year in advance. So they're giving out the ones for next summer now. I really feel like we need to really work on that process of figuring out how to get that permit process changed, because 1-year permits are too long with all the construction going on, not just in our region, but in the entire state. And, you know, we're having issues with the bridge on Highway 85 also sinking, and that's going to be a long-term project. Those oversized loads, you know, are continuing to add to that stress on that bridge. How do we as PPACG weigh in that these permits need to be 6-month permits with 3-month mapping reviews in there somewhere? Because the problem is everybody just pulls out last year's map and says, this is what I'm allowed to do. And I mean, we've even been calling down to in our case, the windmill factory. But it wasn't just windmills going through there. It was houses and all sorts of stuff. So I just think the whole concept of 1 year with the kind of technology we have today, it can be reviewed faster, you know, more often.
You know, I'll bring it up with the excuse me, but definitely there's a lot of planning involved in these companies and organizations that do have to provide that wide load transportation. And so there's definitely weigh in from the trucking industry as to when those permits and the duration of those permits come out. So it is definitely a collaboration between CDOT as well as the trucking agencies that are involved in that decision. So, but I'll bring it up to the team up north in the headquarters, and we'll see what we can do.
Part of the problem is there's so many different permitting companies and wide load companies or whatever they call them out there. And they were saying, well, we're getting to all of them the best we can, but it's not getting down necessarily to where it needs to be. I mean, there's no reason for months now people can't be just going up Highway 85 to Mesa Ridge Parkway. Like I said, we're just one example, and I'm sure this is going on in other places. And so I just think the whole process of those permits perhaps needs to be looked at again and reviewed and possibly revamped. The technology we have pulling out a printed up map from a year ago, you know, I think we're further ahead than that. So it's not against you. It's just, you know.
And it's a really good point about, it's the MAMSIP project, obviously, that's the focal point of it. And I will just say, I think it's a good announcement to say that over the last few weeks, the MAMSIP project officially told headquarters, you know, that stretch, the southern stretch, now still with the northern stretch, but that southern stretch that is particularly impactful. So between south side where 85 touches back to I-25 through 16, that has been released. That is open now for oversized vehicles, I-25 fully open in that regard. So that should make a very significant change, but understood your, you know, what you're saying too. The general just idea that they can't drive in those technology should be updated a little bit.
Well, it's not just that, it's they fall off the road, they clog the really bad, almost U-turn they have to make there, and they get stuck, and then we have to call everybody out, and it just,
Point in time, there should be no call outs. So it could be a 16 up to Academy, but
right,
not that stretch from 16 south.
yeah. All right, well, Colorado Springs made it pretty clear they don't want us to shop up there for the next year, so that's a joke. That's a joke, everybody. Just keep, every time we turn around, we're blocked off another way, right? Just send food and milk. We're fine down there. Okay. Thank you
Chair
so
Thompson.
much. All right, thank you. Okay. Statewide transportation, Mr. Leosatos.
Took me longer to walk here. 4th of July holiday moved the stack meeting to July 11th. So the stack meeting will be this Thursday, so there's no report.
All right, extra long report next month. Okay. All righty, executive director's report.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, and really not a whole lot to share, but I want to thank El Paso County for hosting us here today. Appreciate everybody's help and support in making this happen. Don't know exactly when we'll be back in our space. More to come on the August meeting as soon as we find out more on the progress on our building. But we also have another location in mind as well, El Paso County, can I mention it? Citizen Service Center, where the Public Health Board Commission meets, I believe. So that's what we're planning on now for August, but there is a slim chance that our building could be habitable, but more to come on that. I don't want to jinx this, and I probably already did. The only other thing I'll mention is that be sure to pick up a parking pass if you had to drive and park in the parking garage. Jared has those, or Cheryl, Jared's got them. So yes, that will get you out of the garage, but that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And that takes us, did you have a question for Andy? Okay, that takes us on to member entity announcements. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
All right.
I do have a quick one. Green Mountain Falls has been working with Karen Rowe, PPACG's grant coordinator, with respect to the main bridge coming into town. This afternoon, we'll be requesting some PPRTA 3 funds to reimburse some monies that we're likely going to be spending this year to do a basic cost estimate on it. I think it's 10,000 and under. So just an FYI, that seems to be going well, Andy. Karen's been a great help. Really appreciate it.
All right, congratulations. Mayor Graham, did you have something? All right, anybody online have any member entity announcements?
This is Kelly Mayor, Council did alternate representative. Councilman Ty, so I did send that to Andy. Why don't you just let him know that we did add.
All right, thank you. Anybody else online? Nobody has anything else going on? 4th of July is over. We're all done till Labor Day? Okay. All righty. Well, Fountain does have an event this week, I think it's this weekend, a car show that called Thunder in the Valley. So if you want to look that up, the reason it's called Thunder in the Valley is because at some point they turn on their engines and see who's got the loudest one. So anyways, but so that's always a really fun event. So if you like cars, come out. I suggest coming out early because if there's any thunderhead in the sky in the afternoon, they tend to want to get those cars out of there. So it's always a good event. So if you want to come out to that, and it's free. It's at the park and it's free. So free is always good, right? Alrighty, so anybody barring anything else, I appreciate everybody working through today. We really stayed on schedule, 11:20 for starting a little bit late. And, oh, yes. Mayor, okay, Commissioner Elsner.
This, basically this weekend, we're starting our county fair in Park County, Fairplay. We'll go for, so we got that, and then the last weekend in July is Borough Days in Fairplay, so everybody needs to go out and watch everybody, get their ass up and dance in our Borough Race.
And you lead the pack, right?
You know, once heard that made from Borough Race.
All right, any volunteers in the room would be accepted, huh? All right, okay, thank you for that. All righty, yes. Mayor Durham.
Hi, I just want to let you know that we have a successful Donkey Derby Day weekend. And talking to a lot of people, it was the best. That was really exciting for us. We should be hearing back. High Club does have the Fall Fest, and so that will be the last weekend of September. Summer season for events.
Well, congratulations on such a successful event. I'm glad to know we don't have the donkeys competing against each other on the same weekends, so yes.
I mean, competing races, but not on the same events.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. All right, anybody else? We're good? All righty. All right, so I am adjourning this meeting. Thank you.